Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Church in Lockdown. I'm your host, Pastor Frank Arnold of Crossroads Christian Fellowship. I'd just like to continue on with what we've been talking about. God is big, we are small. God's in control. I know these days certainly make it seem difficult, and even testing a lot of people's faith. But the fact of the matter is, God is still on the throne. God is still in control. And we are who we are. And so this morning, that's what I like to talk about, embracing who we are. So we've been talking about Sabbath. And so God put Sabbath in every week. And He put it in every week for a reason. So that the looking up we do at the beginning of the week will bear fruit in all of the moments of the rest of the week. It also helps us to stay connected to the reality of I am not, but I know I am. Remember we talked about I am not, but I know I am. But let me say this. For me, maybe I'm the only one. Embracing smallness can be pretty hard. Embracing smallness is not a one-time proposition that I do once. Yeah, I'm small, he's big, and it's a wrap. Nah, for me, embracing my smallness is a daily event. Every day I have to remind myself who I'm not. And that's why in Eden, there wasn't this big Sabbath to end all Sabbaths event, like one shot deal. God said, okay, he rested on the Sabbath and we never have to do it again. See, God knew how strong the pull of sinful pride would be. God knew our flesh was at work. God knew that, and we all struggle with this. Even false humility can be a real uh, prideful thing, right? And so God knew this thing. He knew how quickly we would read and believe our own press. It's very easy, especially if God has raised you up, God has put you to brought you to a place you're really good at what you do, whatever it is, and people start giving you acclimates and a lot of compliments and stuff. It's very easy to start believing all that nonsense. And hey, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, and I'm not saying that that's good stuff, but as long as it's done in the contents that everything I have He's given me, all my giftings are from Him, and He's big and I'm little. And if I keep it that way, but I think that's the struggle a lot of times. That's why the Bible tells us that our spirit is willing, but our flesh is weak. That's why seventh day rest has anchored each week from the beginning of time. And why Sabbath is still calling us to the end of ourselves every day, today, every day. You see, I find that I can easily teach that I am not, but he is I am. Right? I could do that. I can say that. I can do that all day long. But the reality is, if I'm being honest, words are cheap, and life is sometimes real hard. Sure, the fruits of this little me, big God thing is amazing. This truth is amazing. We know it's all works. But if I'm being honest, can we be honest today, church? To mean it when I say that I want my life to count for His glory is to drive a stake right through the heart of self. If I really mean it, because again, so often we give, oh yeah, like I talked about last week, the really non-sincere. It's all about Him. It's all about Him. Uh, but when we like it, there's something wrong there, and I think we all struggle with that. See, a painful and determined dying to me that must be part of an every day that I live, or I'll mess things up. That needs to be my reality. That needs to be, and that's humbling. Let's be honest, that's humbling. That's why Paul is. That's what Paul was getting at when he said this. I die every day in 1 Corinthians 15:31. Every single day he had to remind himself, Paul, because again, Paul was the man, and Paul was becoming renowned in the new world, and he was the guy. He was the guy God used to really bring the gospel, and he had to fight it every day. He said he was declaring that his intention to was to come to the end of himself every single day. If there is one thing we can be sure of in our quest to live for His glory and for His fame, it's that the flesh will not die quietly. Our flesh will not die quietly. Our mortal selves will scrap and claw for every ounce of self promotion it can get its hands on. We love it. We love attention. The voice of pride will always rise up whenever an opportunity presents itself, urging us to take back control. That's why, like Paul, we must carry around an attitude. We must carry around a moment by moment attitude of willingness to abandon self, to let it die, no matter what the cost. No matter what the cost. Humility, another word for knowing my name as I am not, can be described as seeing God as He is. Pride, on the other hand, is simply an admission that I haven't seen God at all. Humility is the instant right sizing of one that occurs with just one eyeful of His majesty. True humility, not the false kind that ends up being all about us in the end, at the end of the day, because we've heard that all the time, is not a sign of weakness, it's not a sign of failure, it's not a sign of inability, but rather it's a sign that we are getting to know God and have glimpsed His glory, have seen Him for who He is. And once we see how glorious He really is, church, we realize that that all other glory is futile and fading and totally unconsequential in the grand scheme of things. Simply looking up into God's heavens helps to shrink whatever my day holds to be a manageable size, I'll say. And it reminds me once again how great and big He is. But it's not just the expense of the cosmos to help me remember how small I am. Really old things for me, like pyramids, or the Sistine Chapel, or how many people have lived before me. Mysteries like the conception of life and the sovereignty of God. Things like eternity. I mean, how do we grasp eternity? But when I start thinking of them things, they shrink me. You know, I realized how really small I am. Also, the tiniest of things make me feel smaller still. Things like the subparticles that make up the intricate building blocks of the matter that forms Earth and forms life. Like the stuff of nanotechnology. This is an area of science dealing with activity at the atom and molecular level. Small, really, really small stuff, right? And as it turns out, a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. Now, what the heck is that? 1/1000th of a meter. Well, that's about 1/80,000th the diameter of a human hair. How small is that, right? But yet there's all kinds of things happening at that level. Somehow knowing that people are measuring things that small, actually constructing things useful that are 10,000s of times thinner than one of the hairs on my balding head makes me feel really minuscule, right? That's why all of us, man, we're minuscule. Tiny bundles of nanometer sized components put together, somehow held together, somehow all working, yet people infinitely loved by God. So God looks down at that level. He can see at that level the things that we are discovering, the things that science is now discovering. Remember when I talked about how far out things are in the universe and all this stuff that we're just starting to glimpse and discover. God has put in place whenever He did in eternity's past. He's involved in things so small. He's involved in things so big. See, when you get right down to it, trading in the little story of me is really not that big a sacrifice. When I look at myself, I really am just a tiny, tiny speck on His story. But yeah, I'm so loved by Him that if I was the only guy that He ever created, He still would have went to the cross for me. That's just tremendous, man. When you get down to it, we're really not that big. Who wouldn't want to abandon a script that you could fit on the pointy end of a pin for the chance to get into a glorious epic story, if you will, that is so awesome that its screening will require all of eternity before it's told. In fact, it'll never be fully told. We will spend eternity growing and looking and seeing and trying to comprehend all that our awesome God is. See, glimpsing His glory makes me want to say, your name and renown are the desire of my heart, like Isaiah said in chapter 26 and verse 8. Seeing him makes me want to live for a bigger purpose. Doing everything I do in such a way that it shines the spotlight on him, church. But how do I do that daily? How do we do that daily? And how do I live for his name in the daily grind? How, even in these days, I'm not too proud to sit here and say like this. These 60 days or so now of lockdown have been like, oh, this is wonderful, and it's just been such a great opportunity to get closer to God, and all the things that we hear, which in the beginning it was. I'll have to admit, in the beginning it was, but quite frankly, it's getting a little old for me now. You know what I mean? And I know I'm not alone. So it isn't that I'm just like, oh, God's in control and it's all good. My heart believes that, but my flesh struggles just like you guys every single day. So how in the daily grind of life do I keep my mind clear? Well, the answer is not easy, but it is simple. Climbing Mount Everest is not easy, but it's simple. You start at the bottom, you go to the top, right? You, I think that the way to do that, church, is that you do whatever it is you do in such a way as to reflect his character to the world that's around you. You try real hard to be the Jesus that somebody might only see today. You might be the Jesus that somebody only sees today. It's purposely in my heart that I'm going to try to be the best example of what I really believe in my heart when I'm out there, because we're still out there, right? We might not be out like we were, but we still have to go to the store. We still have to go to the gas station. We still have to do other things, and my flesh wants to complain and say, oh, these masks stink and rah 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 rah, but my spirit tells me, no, Frank, you need to be the example. You need to be the one that people look to and say, oh, he's doing it. How is he doing it? And see, then the opportunity opens up for me to say, the way I'm doing it is because my eyes are focused on God and they're not focused on me. And that's how we get through, church. See, we do whatever it is that we do in such a way as to reflect his character. We don't have to be a preacher like Paul or John, or a missionary, or a worship leader, or a church worker. In fact, you may have a better shot at amplifying his glory if you ain't one of those things. I know for myself, I get involved a lot in AA meetings and stuff, and my anonymity is shot. Everybody knows I'm Pastor Frank, so I don't. As soon as I walk into a room, people expect to hear, oh, here he is talking about Jesus again. But it's the other guys in the room. It's the guys that a lot of people who come to our church, they're the ones that are most effective there, because they're not the preacher who's supposed to be talking about Jesus. They're the example of what a person who has given their life to the Lord looks like, and they're way more effective than I am. That's a fact, right? So you can have a better shot than me at spreading the word of God. See, everyone expects pastor types to live for Jesus. Everybody expects it. We get paid to do that, right? What else would we say? But man, when you do it, when you're the example, it has so much power, church. It has so much power. So how cool is it when people of every walk of life do what they do with a greater purpose in mind? How cool would that be? That's why Paul wrote this in Colossians in chapter 3, verse 17. He said, and whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. See, Paul is saying that living for God's glory is not so much about what you do as it is about doing whatever you do in such a way that it reflects Jesus Christ around you and ultimately points people to him. In other words, church, we don't have a better chance of glorifying God by being a preacher than we have by being a doctor, a maintenance worker, somebody who writes tickets uptown, right, my man Vinny, or a mother. You don't get more credit in the kingdom of God for being a pastor than you do for being a student, guys. And what does that look like? Well, for starters, being the best at what we do, leading in every level of society, being honorable and dependable, walking in humility, and treating everyone the same way that Jesus would. That's what we're called to do, even in the midst of this whole lockdown thing, church. How do we know we have slipped back into the story of us? Well, I might get some people aggravated right here, right now, but I'm going to say it anyway. See, when we live like we're privileged, acting like we deserve a higher standard of life, There's a lot of people right now that think that how is this happening to me? How can I don't deserve being locked down. Well, neither does the whole world. When we're demanding, insisting that God and others meet my needs on my timetable the way that I see fit. When we act pompous, thinking that I'm somebody while only proving I haven't had a good look at God. When we crumble under pressure, church, declaring that the outcome of life rests squarely on my shoulders, not his. If I'm crumbling under pressure in these times, it's probably because I haven't really spent enough time with God. When I start protecting and hoarding, when people have to buy 50 million rolls of toilet paper and gallons of sanitizer, hand sanitizer, marking my turf as though all I have is mine, forgetting it all comes from above, and forgetting that God will provide. God will provide. So maybe instead of having 100 million rolls of toilet paper, I really don't need that many, but I'm taking from somebody who does. When we crave the spotlight, losing sight of the storyline of the one true star, church, this is still all about Jesus Christ, no matter in what. When we fail to celebrate the successes of others who are living for God's fame like we're on a different team, when we actually share supporting roles in the same story. When we dwell on feelings of being unloved, unnoticed, or insignificant, abandoning the miracle of knowing God on a first name basis. Church, I know there's people who are struggling now. I know some of us are home feeling alone, feeling like I'm not loved, feeling like nobody cares. You got to rebuke that lie, because God absolutely has his eyes on you, and he cares about you. He cares about you deeply. You see, all these privileged, demanding, arrogant, frazzled, turf protecting, glory stealing, self-loathing moments are nothing more than a loud call alerting us to the fact that it's time to die again. It's a reminder that the life of smallness requires a vigilant watch and a constant willingness to kill the flesh. But to die to self is to gain on a tremendous scale, church. A daily funeral is nothing more than the doorway to a life filled with all the blessings of God. Jesus Christ came to earth being willing to shed his heavenly glory for the spot in God's redemptive story. He was willing to fully give of himself so that the ultimate glory could come to his Father in heaven. Because he knew there was a greater glory to come. Jesus was never petty, he was never pompous, he was never demanding, and he never ever acted defeated, no matter what the circumstances were that he had to face. Church, I know we're locked in. I know it's tough, and I'm preaching to myself now more than anybody else. Anybody that would listen to this video. I need to remind myself all the time that no matter what's happening, Jesus is still my example. If Jesus was locked down with us, could you imagine if this was the time that Jesus walked the earth and he was quarantined? Would he be done? Would he be at home moping? Would he say, "Oh, the Gospels, it's over. My Father's work is done. I can't do anything. I'm useless"? I don't think so. I think he would come up with a way to still reach people, to still love people, to still bring glory to his Father no matter what. So Jesus wasn't pompous, demanding, and defeated then, and he wouldn't be now. It's just the opposite. He kept giving himself away so others, including you and me, could taste true greatness in a relationship with God. I believe with all my heart if he was here now walking the earth in human flesh, he would still find a way to do that. Jesus knew that embracing smallness and crucifying the flesh is something that we must do every single day. That's why the ultimate expression of smallness, church, is the death of self. Guys, to be honest, looking up doesn't make life's challenges or problems go away. You know, I've been looking up a lot lately, and I've been really questioning a lot of stuff. I've been watching people, especially You know, we've been blessed over the last year or so to get a bunch of new Christians, a bunch of new people, and they're struggling and they're falling. And I'm like, God, what's going on? You know, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I don't know how this fits into the grand scheme of things. I don't know how this lines up biblically. It doesn't. Uh, but I do know this: God is still in control. God's gazing into heaven, keeping my mind stayed on Him. It reassures me that God still is the great I am, and His greatness, His goodness, and His godness is the best lens through which to view everyday life. If I take my eyes off of the Lord, man, I'll fold just like anybody else. I have to keep my eyes focused. And you know what? Sometimes God doesn't give us the answers right away. We have to walk this through. But the answers will come, church. We're going to come through this. We're going to come out of this. And we'll look back and say, aha, now I know what God is doing. But for now, we're in it. But God is in it with us. Like I've said many times in our church, you know, God doesn't pull us out of the hole. He jumps in the hole with us and He walks out with us. God is here, church. He is with us in these days. He is in this virus thing, shutdown thing, quarantine thing, whatever you want to call it. He is right dab in the middle of it. Keep your eyes focused on Him. Keep your eyes focused on Him. We will see what He is doing sooner or later. Sooner or later. But until then, just love Him. And know, unequivocally know that He loves you. Man, I can't wait to see you guys again. I can't. I'm looking forward to hugging you guys. And you know what? For those who maybe won't want to get hugged, I still can't wait to see you too. We're going to get through this, church. Hang in there. Hang in there. I love you guys. I can't wait to see you. Have a wonderful day.